My dear Misfortune, I hope this letter finds you well. I did so enjoy our little discussion of the work of Guy de Mauvaissier the last time we met. I would like to cordially invite you to an intimate gathering of mine on the evening of the 27th. We will be celebrating my recent acquisition of a rather unique historical property, and I think you are just the one to properly appreciate it. I look forward to your RSVP in the affirmative. Most sincerely yours, Prince Titanico.
It was at an art auction, I think, that I first met Prince Titanico. He seemed to think the world of himself. I, quite frankly, thought him a bit of a bore. But if I only accepted social invitations from people I thoroughly approved, I wouldn't dine out very often. I stepped onto the curb from my limo and laid eyes on the place for the first time. Gothic gargoyles loomed ominously over the old house, and creeping vines wound their way up its walls, as though trying to strangle it. The prince had been right. It really was to my taste.
Good evening, ma'am. May I have your name?
Ugh, this hulking thug, on the other hand, not so much. Fortune. Miss Fortune.
Is the Miss a first name or a title, ma'am?
Oh, I like to leave that to the imagination. Now you must be the butler, so why don't you buttle on and show me inside? The evening is a bit damp, I dare say.
No, ma'am. I'm not a butler. Just a valet. My name is Klops.
Oh my, what a terrible shame. Well, butler, or valet, you do open doors, don't you?
Yes, ma'am. Right this way.
From the cobwebs in the corners and the dust on the railings, it was obvious that the house had been abandoned for some time. Some high society guests might have been insulted to be invited to a venue in such ill repair, but it didn't bother me. I realized that the house had been preserved as it was for the effect.
Misfortune has arrived.
Ah, Misfortune, good evening. There are refreshments on the side table. Please do help yourself.
Why, thank you. So, are you the butler? Or are you going to tell me you're just, I don't know, the concierge?
Butler? No. I'm not a servant. I am a close friend and trusted advisor to our dear prince. The Grand Magus of his court, if you will. My name is Horatio.
Charmed, I'm sure.
My dear Misfortune, how are you, darling? It's so good to see you again.
Comtesse de Clecitra! Yes, it's been just ages, hasn't it? I should have known you to be here. You're never one to miss an event on the social circuit.
I dare say I needed something to cheer me up after my late husband's funeral, and an evening like this is just the thing.
Let me see. What exactly was it that we last saw each other? It must have been at the Emperor's ball.
Heavens, yes! Wasn't that quite the affair? Were you there when one of the waiters spilled a tray of champagne all over Duchess Reese's dress?
Oh, yes. That was positively scrumptious, wasn't it? I mean, a shame about the dress, of course. I heard she had it made just for the ball. Such a pity.
Well, given how many people come out nowadays, it was bound to happen to someone. I even heard the poor servant say he was sure he felt someone in the crowd give him a little shove. Can you imagine?
Surely not. These are high lords and ladies we're talking about. No doubt the man is just making excuses for his clumsiness.
You're probably right. Just an unlucky accident, I'm sure.
Of course. I was so sorry to hear about your husband. This is your 4th time a widow, if I'm not mistaken.
Quite so. And for you, 9, I believe?
Ah, yes. They just keep dropping dead, the poor dears. It's so hard to find a good man with stamina these days.
Oh my! Should I be worried? Perhaps you've been cursed.
Me? Cursed? Nonsense. I seem to be doing just fine. But maybe I am bad luck.
Ah, Misfortune, welcome. I'm so delighted that you could come. I trust Horatio has been keeping you entertained.
Oh, yes. La Comtesse and I were just scandalizing your court jester. Or was he a wizard? In any case, scandalizing him with our intimate marriage details.
Of course you were. So tell me, what do you think of the house? I must admit, when I first came into this little period piece, I immediately thought of you.
It seems melancholy, mysterious, and maybe just a little macabre. So yes, I quite like it so far.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. I will take you on a more detailed tour shortly, but we are still waiting for more guests to arrive. And what timing! Here they are now.
Miss Charisse and Miss Leah have arrived, sir.
Is that the Charisse? The industrial heiress? The one who's been throwing all those charity balls ever since she came into her fortune?
The very same!
My beautiful Charisse, please come in. Without you, this place is dark and drab, but your radiance rekindles it anew.
You're too kind.
Oh my! I had heard she was seeing someone, but I never imagined it was him.
Indeed. This party just got a little more interesting.
And this must be Leah, the girlhood friend of whom you speak so very highly?
Yeah, nice place you got here. If you like entertaining dead people.
Dead people? Yeah, I assure you, fair lady, you are perfectly safe here.
I think it was a critique of the decor, not of our safety.
Leah doesn't mean it. It's a lovely house. Really.
On the contrary, Miss Leah may be more right than she knows. Until recently, this mansion was the property of the Lee family, Perhaps you know of them.
Oh, yes, who doesn't? A distinguished family of the nobility with a respected pedigree and a long history of public service and political influence.
So, short version, some stuffy old rich people.
Almost all of the estates out here, away from the city, were owned by old families. But many have had to sell over the years. It must be a bit sad for them, leaving all that history behind.
Indeed, and especially so for the Lees. Theirs is a tale of tragedy, and it ends, as they so often do, in sorrow and blood.
Oh!
Come, the house itself will tell its share of the tale. This is the smoking room. Did the Lee family use this as a quiet place to relax after their evening meals, I wonder? Or was this the proverbial smoke-filled room where secret deals would be struck and the fates of nations decided?
My attention was drawn to a curio cabinet on one side of the room. Some of the items within rather struck my fancy. This cabinet, are these items originals?
I believe so. I have endeavored to change as little as possible about the house since acquiring it. The Lees were well known as eclectic collectors.
They also say that sorcery ran strongly in the Lee family, you know.
Great. As if we didn't have enough reason to think this place was owned by a bunch of creepers.
Come now, surely a smart little girl like you doesn't put any stock in old superstitions.
Magic and superstitions, no. Weird and creepy people, on the other hand, are plenty real.
No need to worry, young lady. You're among good company here.
We will have time to look around in greater detail later, I assure you. For the moment, follow me, if you would. They called this the king bedroom, home to the master of the house. Now, it is as you see it, empty and forlorn, as it waits for a new master to take the place of the old.
It feels so cold.
Milady, I can call for Klops to bring you a sweater.
And while he's at it, perhaps also a textbook on metaphorical versus literal language.
You are so kind, but I'm fine. It's just the atmosphere of this place.
The Lees were among our most powerful families before the Imperial Revolution. But like most of the old guard at the time, they chose the losing side. In many ways, the family never recovered.
They certainly never recovered financially at the very least. Thus the sale of this very house.
It's almost as if old money runs out if you're not smart with it. Who'd have thought?
Quite so. But at least the house has gone to those who can appreciate its history. This is the Queen bedroom, and it has a fascinating story. It is said that the famous senator Lamika Lee herself met her end in this very room during the final days of the revolution.
Yeah, I remember learning about that. She was one of the staunchest supporters of the old republic.
And she was killed here? In her own bedroom? That's so terrible.
By all accounts, she did not go down without a fight. Revolutionary soldiers had stormed the grounds, but none who came in here survived.
They even say that she sustained herself for days on the blood of the soldiers who kept coming for her.
Well, points for ingenuity. I'll grant her that.
But that was all a long time ago. There wouldn't still be any blood left here now, or anything.
Really? With all the red, it's rather difficult to say, isn't it? Who knows how much of it might have soaked into the floor, the walls, the bed.
You are right, my darling Charisse. It is all long past. A good tale for a night of ghost stories, perhaps. But thankfully, these are happier times. And here we have the dining hall. I see that Klops has left some tea and coffee on the table for us.
And orange juice too, I hope. I'm running rather low. All this dry air, you know?
I'll see to it, sir.
For me, just a spot of black coffee would be wonderful.
This concludes our formal tour of the estate, but our evening is far from over. Tonight, my friends, is more than just a housewarming party. Before the night is done, I have a very special announcement to make to you all. Don't worry, my dear. You are safe with me.
Thank you. I was just a bit startled.
Oh, heavens, yes! The light's going out! What horror! I dare say I may faint myself, delicate flower that I am.
Flower? A noxious weed, perhaps?
Please, Misfortune, allow me. I've got you now.
Oh, what would we do without you? On second thought, you can unhand me. I seem to be quite all right.
Good, good. Because there's nothing to be worried about. It's just a little blackout.
Would you be so good as to check the breaker then, my dear Horatio?
Yes, of course. My talents will shed some light on all of us in no time.
I absolutely adore these old homes, but they do so often have problems with the wiring, don't they?
Excuse me, boss. Sir, there's a telephone call for you.
A call for me? Here? How mysterious. You must excuse me, my dear guests. Klops will fetch some candles for you so you can look around while Horatio works his magic on the lighting. I will return very shortly.
I wandered back to the king bedroom by myself to take a closer look at some of the decor. The elaborate carvings on the wooden bedpost intrigued me. Spirits and demons of all sorts circled and surrounded any lord who might sleep in this bed. Was this preferable, I wondered, than sleeping in the arms of Lamika Lee, blood drinker as she was rumored to be? I'd hoped that by taking a closer look at the ruined portrait, I might be able to discern who had been pictured. I could imagine no shortage of delicious reasons why a lord's portrait might be disfigured in a house such as this. Shredded by a bitter servant when the master was thought absent, savaged by an angry child who never quite lived up to expectations. Alas, the portrait seemed more a victim of old age than of some crime of passion, and of the face, I could make out nothing at all. Looks like our court magician has managed to conjure back a little light for us after all. I'd hoped that by taking a closer look at the ruined portrait, I might be able to discern who had been pictured. I could imagine no shortage of delicious reasons why a lord's portrait might be disfigured in a house such as this. Shredded by a bitter servant when the master was thought... Looks like our court... For just the slightest of moments, I considered collapsing into the antique red chair in the room's corner. After all, we'd spent the evening on our feet, traipsing about the house for the prince's little ghost tour. Then I remembered that spiderwebs don't just come out of nowhere, and that upholstery is a prime place for the little nasties to hide. I would have to remember to warn our doe-eyed little angel about that as well. You know, in addition to the possible bloodstains and all. I simply adore old chandeliers, especially the ones that come crashing down unexpectedly on the heads of people I don't like. Modern light fixtures just don't have that same potential. Just what kind of skeletons did the Lee family have locked away inside that conspicuous old chest? I must confess, I have a terrible weakness for things that are locked up to keep me out of them. Alas, it's my brother Sir Price who's rather handy with the lockpicks, not me.
At last I found you, Misfortune. You need to come right away. Please.
Whatever is the matter? You look like you've seen a ghost with that one eye of yours.
There's no time to waste, miss. You should see for yourself.
Gathering my skirts, I hurried after the hulking butler, valet, back to the hall where we had first arrived. From the urgency in his pace and in his voice, I knew that something had happened. But still... It was our host, Prince Titanico. He was dead. That alone wouldn't scare me. I was no stranger to dead bodies. But from the way he was lying, it was clear that his death was no accident. He'd been murdered. And that meant that someone in the mansion was the murderer.
I found the rest of the ladies. Now, Klops, what is this all about?
Is that a body? Here! Oh, how positively horrid!
Ugh! Everyone, shield your eyes! This is not a sight for fair sensibilities.
The other guests stood in the doorway opposite myself and Klops. My eyes fell on our oh-so-sensitive ingenue, Charisse. If ever there was a time to faint for real, this was it. But she didn't. She just stared into the room, her eyes wide, glassy, and unblinking.
Somebody needs to call the police!
Yes, ma'am. Right away.
It'll take them a while. We're ways out of the city.
We shouldn't touch anything. Let's all go back to the dining room and wait for the police to arrive.
No.
What?
We can't just sit and wait. We need to investigate. We need to see the truth with our own eyes.
I'm with you on that, Sherry.
Well, if our precocious little darlings are going to be poking about, I'm certainly not going to be left out.
If you insist, then.
My dears, please do be very careful.
We won't disturb anything, Comtessa. I promise.
That is not what I meant. It could be that whoever did this has not gone far.
Oh. Surely it was just some villain who has since fled the scene.
I'll keep an eye out, sir. Just nobody wander far, you understand?
Perhaps it would have been more comforting to believe the culprit was some stranger, a shadow in the night that was now long gone. But it just wouldn't have fit the evening's theme, now would it? I had a hunch that there was something more afoot in the old manor that night, and I certainly wasn't going to trust anyone else to properly figure it out.
No, what a tragedy. What a cruel twist of fate. And to think, tonight was meant to be an evening of joy and making merry.
I'm not exactly sure that joy is the word I'd pick for an evening in this house. But I'll admit, I was never expecting anything like this.
It was such a monstrous sight. Do you think Miss Leah and Miss Charisse will be all right?
All right. They looked healthy enough to me.
No, I mean, do you think they'll be distraught? You, if you don't mind me saying, are a woman of the world, Misfortune. But they are so young, so pure, like a newly bloomed flower that has only seen sunlight, never knowing that there is also night and all the horrors that it hides.
A rose, by any other name, can still prick you quite nastily if you don't know what you're doing.
I beg your pardon?
Never mind, my dear Horatio. Prince Titanico mentioned an announcement that he wished to make this evening. Do you know what that was all about?
Yes. Or at least, I think so.
You mean you're not sure?
You must understand, the prince was a man with a flair for the dramatic. He rather liked his secrets, and hence his surprises.
That I don't doubt. In fact, I wouldn't put it past him to have staged his own death, just to leave us all in suspense.
My dear friend did have rather unusual tastes, but I fear in this case it was not part of the plan.
I see. So, are you going to tell me then?
About what?
About the announcement, of course.
No, I think not.
Oh?
As I said, he liked his secrets. Telling you now, it just wouldn't be what he'd want.
Well, if you do so insist on being obstinate, I suppose I will have to make do on my own.
A true magician never reveals his secrets, Misfortune, nor those of his friends.
Where were you when this absolutely dreadful business happened?
I imagine I must have still been in the basement, or very close to it. I'd only just got the lights back on, and I was coming up the stairwell when Klops found me.
Was he the one to discover the body then?
I believe so. He asked me to help find all the guests, which leads me to cleverly deduce that I was the first one he encountered after the gruesome discovery.
Clever indeed. Nothing gets past you, does it, dear?
Ahem. Well, I wouldn't go that far. But where were you, Misfortune?
I was in the king bedroom.
Alone?
As it happens, yes. I've always been the sort to need a little bit of me time every so often, you know.
But you could have been in danger!
Oh, horrors, you're right. If only I was clairvoyant, I might even have been worried at the time, too.
Well, never fear. You're safe with me now.
Yes, I'm sure I am. Horatio, how long had you known our dear departed host?
I have, well, had been his closest friend and confidant for many years.
Oh yes, the grand magus of his court, didn't you say?
I did, but alas, though I can conjure a parlor trick or two, I could do little to foresee this unseemly doom.
Indeed. Unseemly. Just the word I would have used. Presumably you would know, then, if the prince had any enemies.
A man like the prince always does, but none of them are here.
I would say the evidence suggests the contrary.
Surely you don't mean to suggest that it was one of us. After all, didn't you say that all your husbands just died from bad luck? Perhaps it was that.
Yes, quite. Bad luck. I do believe it's about time I took a bit of a stroll.
Do be careful, Misfortune, and please, if you have need of my talents...
Worry not, my dear. If the lights happen to go out again, I'll know just who to call. I returned to what the prince had called the proverbial smoke-filled room. It struck me that this would be the perfect place to call everyone and reveal the truth to this mystery. All in good time, of course. In the meantime, I thought it wise to take another look around while I still had the room to myself. Goodness, the evening must be wearing on me more than I thought. Even my purse seems heavy. A knife? In my bag? It's even flecked with blood. And what's this? A ring? It looks decidedly pricey, but it's not one of mine. How did it get here? For just a moment, I was confused. But then the gruesome sight of Titanico's body flooded my thoughts, and the truth hit me. I was being set up. Almost certainly, what I held in my hands was the knife that had stabbed the prince. I don't know how it got in my purse, but whoever put it there had made a mistake. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that anyone who tries to frame me for murder is going to regret it. That cabinet had a few things of interest in it, if I remember correctly. Let's take a closer look. In the cabinet, there was an odd little doll that seemed to be made out of straw. Was it some kind of voodoo doll? I tried making those a time or two myself, although, to my great dismay, they never seemed to actually work quite right. A padded velvet cushion sat in the cabinet looking somewhat forlorn. Surely it was meant to showcase something more interesting, but there was nothing on it now. I could swear that something had been on this cushion before. Just what was it? Yes, that was it. There had been a knife on the cushion during our tour. I was sure of it. And not just any knife. The knife that may have stabbed the prince. But who could have taken it? I cast my mind back, trying to remember if anyone had lingered behind for even a moment. But it availed me nothing. The prince had been the first to leave the room, but that was the only thing of which I was certain. On one side of the room, there was a wine rack filled with dusty old bottles. Most were empty, but a few still contained small amounts of what must have been very well-aged red wine. At least, I hoped it was just wine. With a family like the Lees, one could never be quite sure. Perhaps I should take a bottle with me to check it later, just in case. The strange pose of the statue in the corner of the room rather reminded me of my third husband. You see, the last time I saw the dear old boy, he was in the process of losing his balance and tumbling down the whole stairs. Terrible tragedy, really. I had to have those stairs completely replaced just to get the blood out. as best I knew, our mysterious murder had happened here, in the hall. At the very least, I thought the body warranted a closer look. Luckily for me, I was no stranger to corpses. Funerals for 9 different husbands will do that, you know.
13, 14, 15.
It seems I'm not alone here. But what is the poor girl doing? She's just pacing back and forth and muttering to herself. Have the evening's events already broken her fragile little mind? My dear little Miss Cherise, what in the world are you doing?
I'm counting.
So good to see they still teach that in grade school these days. How marvelous.
I think the timing seems off. I need to check again.
On second thought, maybe they don't teach it so well after all. I almost think I'll regret asking. But darling, what timing is off?
It's Mr. Klops, the butler.
Valet.
Oh, yes, of course.
Well, what about him then?
I saw him go into this room when the lights were out.
I see. Is that when he found the body, do you think?
I think so. He came running out looking for Mr. Horatio. I don't think he saw me.
Oh, well, you can't blame the poor man for that. He only sees half as much as the rest of us. But just what does that have to do with all your pacing and counting?
I think he was in here too long.
I beg your pardon. Too long?
I've been timing how long it takes to walk from the door to the body. It doesn't add up. I'm sure he was in here longer. Maybe an extra 20 seconds.
Well, aren't you a delightfully clever little girl? Maybe you should have been a detective rather than a fabulously wealthy industrial heiress.
Oh, it's nothing, really. It's just... well, it's not my first time being around a murder case. That's all. I guess that helps a little.
I'm sorry, my dear, but did you say this isn't your first murder?
Yes. No. It wasn't my murder. But I was there when it happened.
My. I never would have imagined. It must make for an absolutely thrilling story, I'm sure.
Please, you must forgive me, but I really don't want to talk about it.
Of course. How rude of me to pry. I'm sure the experience must have been just ghastly for you. But, oh my, you don't suppose it could have something to do with our current predicament, do you?
No, I don't think so. It was a long way away, and the killer was stopped. And besides, except for Leah and I, nobody here was involved.
Well, that's a relief. It would be just awful if there was a serial killer following you around, or something like that. It must just be coincidence, then, that people keep dropping dead wherever you go.
I suppose that it must be.
In any case, it's a good thing I found you, my dear. I had a feeling you just might be in need of my expertise.
Your expertise?
Oh, yes, dear. I've buried 9 husbands after all. I've got this morning business down pat, if I do say so myself.
Forgive me, I didn't know. I'm so sorry to hear it. That's just so much bad luck for one lifetime.
One gets used to it. And it's not all bad news. My last husband, the Duke, left me this marvelous country estate that is absolutely to die for. But silly me, here I am going on and on about myself. You must be so terribly distraught about all of this.
The prince and I, well, we hadn't been seeing each other for very long. But still, it's such a horrible crime. That's why I can't rest until I know the truth behind it.
He did seem rather smitten with you, I must say.
Well, he just liked to exaggerate, I'm sure. He had rather his own unique way with words.
Unique is one way to put it. You don't suppose that, in his grandiose infatuation, he wrote you into his will, did he?
Oh, I can't imagine that he would have. He never said so anyway.
Pity. That's usually the first thing I ask for. Ah, well, live and learn, my dear. I decided it was time to take a closer look at the body. Corpses are always a bit distasteful, to be sure, but I'd seen enough rich old lords killed in unfortunate hunting accidents that I was rather used to it. The prince was face down on the floor, and there was an odd angle to his right leg. So odd, in fact, that I'd wager a platinum necklace or two that it was broken in at least one spot. Could simply collapsing on the spot from a stab wound cause a break like that? I seriously doubt it. There was something odd about the prince's right hand. I knelt down to get as close a look as I could without touching it. The palm and inside of the fingers had been burnt and blackened. I checked the left hand as well, just to be sure, but it seemed undamaged. The prince's most obvious injury was the wound on his back. Judging from the way the clothes had been pierced, it had almost certainly been made by a knife. The wound itself was deep and vicious, clearly the work of no ordinary butter knife. The blood had soaked through the back of the prince's evening wear, but given the nastiness of the wound itself, there wasn't as much of it as I might have expected. Was it only coincidence that the trail of candles in the center of the main hall seemed to lead straight to the body of the prince? Or had our mysterious killer intentionally used them to frame their handiwork out of some sense of macabre artistry? Well, tragic as it might be to despoil a work of art, it occurred to me that a candle might come in handy for searching the dark old house. Since with all the commotion of finding the body, I must have misplaced the one I had earlier. What have we here? There's an extra wire clipped to the back of the phone. I'm quite certain this sort of phone doesn't normally need more than one wire. Let's just leave it alone for now, shall we? The phone itself was heavy, made of metal, and certainly quite old-fashioned. Normally, that's the sort of style I prefer, but right now, a call history of some kind would have come in rather handy. But why is the receiver dangling like that? Did this table get bumped at some point? I suppose I could dial a number here, if I knew of one worth calling. I suppose I could dial That just seems like a random number. I certainly don't mind making a crank call or two now and again, but this probably isn't the time or place. I suppose I could dial That just seems like a random number. I suppose I could dial a number here. That just seems like a random. I suppose I could dial a number here. That just seems like... The house must have been abandoned for quite some time indeed. For on one side of the hall, part of the wall itself had collapsed, and nature was slowly but surely spilling into the house and reclaiming its territory. Let's hope that the place would hold up long enough for us to wrap up our little party at the very least. When I'd first arrived at the manor house, I thought it might rain that evening. And in light of recent events, I half expected a flash of lightning to provide an atmospheric backdrop to the stage of our little drama, complete with a clap of thunder as the applause. But the night air hung cold and still, and the only sound was the rustling of weeds and brush that clawed against the foundations of the building. Wait. Rustling? But there isn't any wind. Who's that out there?
It's just me, Misfortune, ma'am.
I say, what in the world are you doing skulking about in the brush like that? Don't tell me they get you to do the groundskeeping around here, too.
Sometimes I do a bit of gardening, yes. You know, when things get out of hand.
Gardening? At a time like this?
Well, no, ma'am. Right now, I'm keeping an eye out for strangers, just to keep everyone safe.
What a relief. I do feel ever so much safer when a hulking man with an eye patch is lurking in the shadows right outside the house. My dear Klops, please tell me you didn't really think there might still be a stranger lurking around here in the underbrush.
Well, ma'am, no one was watching the door when the prince was in the hall. Whoever did it could have run right out the front door.
Why, indeed they could have. Not much gets by you, it seems. And yet, here you are, searching through the weeds at the base of the house. With the coast clear, would our furtive stranger not just have kept going?
I'm sure he probably did. I'm just looking for footprints.
Oh, footprints now. Ah, yes, of course. And have you found any?
No, ma'am.
More's the pity. It would have been so much nicer to believe the killer was no longer in the house. especially with our resident bodyguard busy traipsing through the muck outside.
Sorry, ma'am, but I'm just a valet.
Of course you are. So, you were in quite the tizzy when you came running to find me earlier. Was it you who found the body?
Yes, ma'am. I found it in the hall, just like you saw.
And what were you doing before that?
Well, I let the boss, the prince, into the hall to take his phone call. Then I went to the pantry to get more candles for the dining room. I didn't know how long Horatio was going to be with the lights.
So, the prince was alone then when you left him in the hall?
Yes, ma'am. Without a doubt.
Why then, it appears you may have been the last one to see the poor prince alive.
Wouldn't that actually have been the killer, ma'am?
I suppose so. But then, you did just say you were quite certain he was alone.
What do you mean by that? I'm just doing my job here.
Oh yes, of course. I'm sure you're quite excellent at, well, whatever it is that valets do. That's right. In all this commotion, I'd almost forgotten the whole reason the prince left us was to take a phone call. Do you know who was calling?
No, ma'am, I don't.
Well, that's a little odd. They didn't give a name.
I asked, but they said the matter was confidential.
So you spoke to them then. Can you describe anything at all about the caller?
Yes, I took the call, and they asked for the prince right away. Which is a bit funny, now that you mention it. I didn't think very many people would have this number. Anyway, pretty sure the caller was a woman. She was all crisp and businesslike, too. I'm afraid I can't tell you more than that.
I suppose it would be too much to hope that this rotting old place would have call display.
No, ma'am. It's a wonder most of the wiring around here even works at all.
Must be magic, I suppose. Can you tell me anything about our late host? Perhaps about this grand announcement of his?
About the boss? The prince? Sorry, ma'am, but he wasn't the sort to confide in a mere valet like myself.
Oh, come now. I know how it is with servants. You're bound to have seen or heard a thing or two about the house, whether your master knows it or not.
Look, I take my duties seriously. I make it a point not to see things that I'm not supposed to see.
Yes, I suppose not seeing things would be rather a specialty of yours. Tell me, have you worked for the prince for a long time?
Yes, ma'am. Many years now.
And you're still just a valet? Tisk tisk. Promotions must be hard to come by in that household. There were stories, from the time of the Revolutionary War, that when soldiers first stormed the grounds of the Lee Manor, ferocious spectral beasts appeared out of nowhere to tear apart the terrified trespassers. Of course, you can't believe everything you hear. But I found myself keeping a watchful eye on the wolf statues in the courtyard, just to be sure. Klops claimed he had already checked the ground around the house for footprints, but I thought it couldn't hurt to double-check. Apparently I thought wrong, though, for as I stepped off the path into the brush, the weeds and thorns tore at my skirts and scratched my ankles. You know, I think I'll just take the one-eyed brute's word for it after all. A run-down shed sat in the corner of the yard. Gingerly, I tried the door, but the wood had swollen, and it seemed stuck in its frame. It was just as well, I suppose. Ugh. Why would I want to go inside a moldy old shed anyway? Ugh. Klops claimed he had already checked the... Apparently, I thought... I returned to the king bedroom, where I'd been when the whole grisly affair started. I thought it might give me a chance to think by myself, but alas, it was not to be. The curtains were drawn back, and a particularly pernicious twerp of a girl was leaning halfway out the window. After what had already happened, it would be such a shame were she to slip and go out all the way. Young girls these days really ought to be more careful. My dear little girl, just what are you doing? You're liable to go for quite the little tumble if you keep leaning out the window like that.
I'm trying to get a decent signal.
Oh, for your phone? Yes, it does seem like you young people just can't get by without them these days.
I don't care about the phone. I want network access.
Whatever for.
So I can hack the phone company records and figure out who called this house.
You can do that, can you?
Yep. Look, I hate people staring over my shoulder when I'm working. Can't you go find a fainting couch and a bottle of smelling salts or something?
Now, Miss Leah, was it? I'm afraid I just don't know very much about you. Who are you exactly?
I'm Sherry's friend.
I rather gathered that much. But, my dear girl, what with her enormous fortune, social connections, and nauseatingly innocent good looks, I'd imagine the list of people who'd like to be friends with Miss Charisse is rather long. What's special about you?
Fine. My parents were rich too. They're in the tech business. Sherry and I went to private school together. I helped her with math, she helped me be a better person. Fair trade, I hope.
You say were. Have your parents passed away as well?
No, we just don't get along too well right now.
Ah, and your dear old fabulously wealthy school friend took you in. How sweet of her.
I see where you're going with this. And no, I'm not financially dependent on Charisse. Sure, I live with her, but I've got a nice little fund of my own. So I've got no motive to bump off a boyfriend out of fear that he'll kick me out of the house or something like that.
Oh my, perish the thought. I'd never dream of suggesting such a thing.
No, I'm sure you've got much nastier things to save for your dreams.
So your friend Miss Charisse, Just how long had she been seeing our dear departed host?
Not that long, but he seemed pretty intense about it. Nighttime river cruises, the opera, the theater, you name it.
Ah, swept off her feet into a whirlwind romance with a dark and mysterious dashing older man. Your friend must have been positively giddy with excitement.
Something like that, yeah.
Oh, it must have been so hard for you, being left out of all that and resigned to watching from the sidelines.
Yeah, right. That kind of high society stuff isn't really my thing.
No, I suppose not.
Come to think of it, Wizard Boy sometimes looked a little pouty at being left out, though.
Did he really? How do you know? Did he tell you so?
No, nothing like that. Just an impression I got. Not really my business anyway. As long as Sherry's happy, I'm happy. That's all that matters.
I see. So, was she happy?
It was what she wanted. So yeah.
And try though you might, you just can't bring yourself to sound happy about that. My, how curious.
Look, if you're gonna pry any further, you'd better go get yourself a crowbar, don't you think?
So, your sweet little friend. She can be quite the tease, it seems. I was just talking to her earlier, and she let it drop that this wasn't her first murder case.
You must think you're very clever for worming that out of her. You know, I bet you're one of those people who think they're a lot smarter than they really are, aren't you?
My dear Leah, something like that is not exactly the wisest thing to say when you're perched precariously on the edge of a window. It's ever so fortunate that I'm in a good mood today.
A good mood? Here, now! How could... No, never mind. I forgot who I was talking to.
In any case, my dear, Miss Therese said the only other one here who was involved in that case was you. No matter how smart I might or might not think I am, surely you can't blame me for wondering whether it might be relevant to our current predicament.
Well, it's not. Not directly, anyway.
Aha! Not directly. Now we're getting somewhere.
Look, I didn't want to talk about it, and I'm sure Sherry said the same thing. It was bad. For everyone, but especially for her. The truth she learned that day, she's never going to forget. And she definitely doesn't need you dredging it all up.
There's no need to tell me, darling. She learned the truth about her family, didn't she? That not all that lovely money of theirs was obtained through, how shall we say, completely honest business. It's plain as day, really. Insufferably idealistic young socialite comes into her fortune and starts throwing it at every charitable cause she can find out of guilt. Oh yes, I know her type well enough.
We learned that her family had been mixed up with some really bad people. No, more than just bad. With true evil.
And so it turns out her life of wealth and comfort was built on the blood of innocence. So very tragic for her, I'm sure.
She just wants to make up for it all. Make it all right again. Sometimes I worry she thinks she can carry the weight of the whole world. She pushes herself hard enough.
Yes, I did say insufferably idealistic, didn't I?
If by that you mean a better person than you'll ever be, then yeah, that's spot on. She just needs someone to watch her back. That's all.
And let me guess, you do whatever it takes to keep your dear little friend safe, wouldn't you?
Whatever it takes.
My, such ardor, such resolve. Remind me never to get on your bad side, darling.
Too late.
So, who was it then that called the house?
If I tell you, will it get you to leave me alone?
My dear girl, this predicament affects all of us. If you found out anything that might be in the least helpful, surely it's in all of our interests for you to share it.
I'll take that as a yes. Fine. The number is 11223344. It's a business number registered to Oxley Accounting Services.
An accountant? Doesn't exactly sound like a social call, now does it?
Who knows? As far as I can tell, this Prince Titanico had some pretty weird friends.
You haven't tried contacting them then?
Nah, that'd mean talking to more weirdos. I'd rather try and hack into their private email or something and see what's up.
I'll leave you to it, my dear. Had these books on the shelf belonged to the Lee family as well? Curious, I skimmed a few of the titles. A History of the Republic, Genealogy of the Great Families, How to Train Killer Bats, Genghis Khan and the 21 Balloons. All dreadfully dull classics, I'm sure. The elaborate carvings on the wooden bedpost intrigued me. Was this preferable? The air in the old house was still and thick with dust. But even had there been a draft, I doubt the black drapes by the room's window would have stirred. Even I was surprised by how thick and heavy the material was. No sunlight would have pierced its way into this room against its occupant's wishes. That much was certain. I suppose I could dial a number. Oxley Accounting Offices. That's what that Leah girl had said. Of course, she could have just been making it up to get rid of me. I'd certainly do the same to her. But...
Oxley Accounting Offices, Oxley speaking. Are you a new or pre-existing client?
To tell you the truth, I'm not really sure.
I see. That doesn't bode well for the organizational state of your paperwork.
Actually, I'm calling on behalf of a friend.
In that case, please be advised then that I will only be able to answer the most basic of queries without certified written permission from your associate, or friend, as you call them.
Sadly, I fear my friend's signature would be difficult to obtain at the moment, but I think basic queries will do well enough for now. Now, Miss Oxley, was it? You You sound like a very organized person. Can you tell me if you called this number earlier this evening?
Yes, I log all of my calls, both incoming and outgoing. And yes, I did call this number at 8:32 p.m. Sharp, of course.
Yes, 8:30. That sounds about right. Wait a minute. Isn't that rather late for an accounting office to still be open?
An 8-hour business day is standard in many sectors, but we take our work very seriously here at Oxley Accounting. Besides which, it was requested that I call at precisely that time.
Requested? How odd. Requested by whom?
In the absence of written consent, I am not authorized to provide that information.
Oh, of course you're not. How silly of me. Can you at least tell me if you spoke to anyone when you called?
Yes, the call was answered. I asked to speak with a particular individual and was told to wait.
And you did wait then?
For 4 minutes and 36 seconds, yes.
And after such an oddly specific yet arbitrary amount of time, you hung up?
Certainly not. Someone picked up, I introduced myself again, and then they hung up.
How rude. To think anyone could hang up on such an obviously charming personality as yours. Might you happen to know a man called Prince Titanico?
I am familiar with that name, yes. In fact, I was hoping I might speak to him. Is he there?
I'm afraid that really won't be possible.
Very well. In that case, please inform him I will continue to try to contact him at regular intervals.
Oh, you can try. Can you tell me, was Prince Titanico a client of your office?
In the absence of written consent, I am not authorized to provide that information.
But if you're trying to contact him, you must have some kind of business relation with him.
In the absence of written consent, I am not authorized to provide that information.
You can be just insufferably obstinate, can't you?
If by that you mean thoroughly professional, then yes.
Same thing, really. Miss Oxley, I'm not entirely sure how to tell you this, but Prince Titanico is dead.
I see. That will definitely have some ramifications for my paperwork.
Not only that, but it seems rather likely that he was killed precisely when he came to answer your phone call.
Noted. I suppose that explains why he hung up so abruptly and didn't call back.
Yes, didn't you find that a little bit odd at the time?
Not really. For certain types of business, it's quite common to encounter some reluctance on behalf of the other party.
But hang on, I thought the prince was your client. Why would he be reluctant to speak with his own accountant?
Accounting is not the only service we provide at our office. We also perform audits, credit checks, and financial investigations of various sorts.
Of course, now it makes sense. The prince was being audited, wasn't he?
In the absence of written consent, I am not authorized to provide that information.
It's quite all right, dearie. I can connect the dots myself. You've been ever so helpful, in spite of yourself, really.
You are welcome to log your opinion of our interaction on our office's website feedback form. Now, exactly who was I speaking with again? Are you with the police?
Ah, no. They're on their way. My name's Misfortune. I'm one of the guests.
I'm quite sure that name has been in my files before. Something to do with a possible inheritance tax irregularity from a deceased spouse? Let me check.
That won't be necessary. Besides, the wiring is a bit dodgy in this place. The phone could go out at any moment. Ta-ta then! So, that Klops fellow. He was the prince's valet. Have I got that right?
Yes, that's right. Mr. Tor is the butler, but today's his day out.
So is he, a good valet then? I only ask because I just found him skulking about in the brush outside, and I wasn't really sure if that was the sort of things valets usually do.
Was he now? Well, I can't say I know terribly much about the exact duties of my dear friend's household staff, but I know he did some gardening from time to time.
Indeed, gardening. I believe he said something along those lines as well.
Yes, well, he was quite good at whacking weeds, or so I heard.
I suppose that sounds about right. If I were a weed, or really, even if I wasn't, I wouldn't want to get whacked by him either. Was he happy with his work? Do you know?
Come to think of it, he did seem a bit jealous of Mr. Tor's position from time to time.
No doubt being a butler pays better than a mere valet. Though I'm not sure how either stacks up against a grand magus.
Need I remind you, Misfortune, I am not, was not, an employee of the prince's household.
But of course, how silly of me. So back to Mr. Klops then. Do you know if he had issues with money? Might he badly have needed a raise?
Really couldn't say. Perhaps someone on the staff did, though. I did sometimes hear Mr. Tor complain about small valuables going missing.
So very interesting. You've been a great help, my dear Horatio.
It is my pleasure to be of service.
Horatio, dear, are you certain you won't tell me about this special announcement that the prince was going to make?
Of course, my lips are sealed.
Oh, ho-hum. Then I suppose I'll just have to tell you about it.
What?
It had to do with this, didn't it?
Alakazam, how did you get that?
I rather wish I knew that myself. But for now, I think it's best to stay on track while the wizard is still wonderstruck. Tut-tut, my dear. Magicians aren't the only ones who get to keep secrets. The important thing is what the prince planned to do with it. It was his, wasn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, it was. Well, it wasn't exactly for him, you see, yet... oh dear.
No need to worry, darling. I already know exactly what it was for. It's simple, really. He was going to propose to Charisse.
And what makes you say that?
Oh, come now, my dear. It doesn't take a fortune teller to see that he'd been doing everything in his power to sweep her off her feet. Add to that a diamond ring sized for slender little fingers, and the story all but writes itself.
It is true that he was quite, taken with her, yes. I mean, who wouldn't be, really?
Oh, yes. Sweet, demure, pliable, and very, very rich. Just the type for the prince, I'm sure.
You're not going to tell Miss Charisse about this, are you? Surely it would only make things even harder for her.
No, at least not yet. Like I said, sometimes I like to have a secret or two up my sleeve myself. But confirming that I was right about the prince's intent certainly does paint this mystery in a whole new light. Long, narrow tables stretched down either side of the room for what seemed like forever. At one end were the remnants of our refreshments from earlier, but I think I'll leave them alone for now. I mean, it didn't look like poison had anything to do with the prince's death, but one can never be too careful. The family crest of the Lee still adorned some of the flags and banners that hung from the walls in the dining room. I suppose it wasn't a bad crest, really. A little overly dramatic with all the spikiness, perhaps. But then, they weren't exactly a family that had cultivated a particularly cuddly image. At first, I was inclined to laugh at the giant, oddly proportioned statue that was the dining room's centerpiece. But as I drew closer, I couldn't help but feel a bit intimidated by the way it loomed over me. Then again, I could say the exact same things about that gruesome one-eyed manservant Klops. Who'd have ever thought he would have so much in common with a work of art? Inside the lantern was a candle. I doubt anyone would notice if I took it with me. Thanks to my candle here, I should be able to find the light switch. Ah, there we go. With only a little effort, I found my way down to the basement of the old house. Although our little adventure with the lighting had seemed natural enough at the time, given the condition of the house, the prince's murder had colored all of the evening's happenings with a more sinister shading. Perhaps examining the house's electrical panel for myself would shed some light on the mystery. That must be the breaker panel. Let's take a closer look, shall we? I don't know much about this sort of thing, but it looks to me that all the switches are on, except for one. Well, fun as it would be to make the little girl faint again, I probably shouldn't touch them for now. Hello, what have we here? It's an electrical timer. I once used one of these in the school breaker room to shut off the lights during my high school exams. You can use it to flip a breaker switch at a predetermined time. The question is, just what is it doing here? I'm starting to think our little blackout earlier might have been no accident after all. The wiring is old, but it looks to me like it should all work. It's a bit of a mess, though. Hard to tell just what goes where. In the queen bedroom, I found my old social acquaintance, the Comtessa. To say that I trusted her was going much too far. But I had certainly known her longer than anyone else there that evening. Besides that, I knew her to have an ear for gossip and an eye for detail. If there was anyone who could tell me a little more about the cast of our little drama, it was her.
there you are, Misfortunate, darling. I must say this whole affair is just dreadful, isn't it?
Tragic. Truly tragic.
Prince Titanico was an eccentric man, but he knew how to put on a show. Sadly, this is rather more than I expected, I'm afraid.
Are we really sure he didn't plan the whole thing after all? You know, have the last laugh, go out with a bang, that sort of thing.
Oh no, my dear, I don't think so. The prince, by all accounts, was far too fond of himself for that.
Pity. It would have made for such a delicious story. Not to mention no longer having to worry about a possible killer being on the loose.
Quite so.
Darling, I have a little confession to make. Although I'd met our good host, ex-host, a number of times, I'm afraid I never really knew him, if you understand what I mean.
I hardly expect you're the only one in that situation, my dear. The prince had this maddening habit of talking all the time and yet somehow still saying very little.
So was he really a prince then? Do you know?
These days, title really does not mean what it once did. After all, how many do you have now?
Oh, let me see. At least 3. All by marriage, of course. Sometimes it can be hard to keep track.
Just so. No doubt our late prince could make some claim or another, but these days, who can't? Just about anyone can claim a tenuous connection to some great old family that was thought lost in the Revolution, and it's so hard to prove them wrong. And as long as there isn't money involved, no one much cares to try.
So he called himself a prince, and that's about all anyone knew. He wasn't married or anything, was he?
Good heavens, I hope not. You did see him doting all over our sweet little Charisse, didn't you?
Come now, Comtessa. You and I both know that's proof of nothing.
So cruel, but so true. Still, if he was ever married, I never heard of it.
And you do have such a knack for hearing interesting things, darling. If there was anything to hear, I dare say you would have heard it.
Oh, modesty forbids.
In any case, it would seem our late prince was quite the enigma then. At least I can feel glad that I wasn't the only one in the dark. On a small table near the center of the room sat a little book, the kind one could write in. Could it be a diary? And by reading it, might I steal a forbidden glimpse into the inner life of some member of the once mighty Lee family? But to my great disappointment, I found the pages empty. Ah, well, I suppose that hoping to discover the defiant last words of the infamous Lamika Lee written in blood really would have been a bit much to ask for. I couldn't make out the lady in the ruined portrait, but I assumed it must be some grand old dame of the Lee household. Why had she been left behind, I wondered? Had the rest of the family simply not liked her? Mind you, if I ever had to sell one of my estates, I'd rather fancy leaving behind as many self-portraits as I could spare. You know, just so that the new owners would feel like I was keeping an eye on them. A set of old vases sat on the dresser. Could there possibly still be anything in them? The neck of the nearest vase was too narrow for me to see anything inside at a glance. I suppose I could have stuck my hand in to feel around, But there could easily be a mouse or a spider lurking in there. No. That would be a much more suitable job for Miss Charisse and those small, dainty hands of hers, I think. I don't know about you, but I can't shake the impression that Miss Charisse was, for lack of a better term, the guest of honor this evening. What do you know about her?
Oh, the poor girl. She's an only child, and her parents passed away just recently.
Yes, I feel for her. An enormous inheritance, and all of a sudden no one around to tell her how to spend it. The family, they were industrialists, were they not?
That's right, though by the end they were into pretty much everything. Manufacturing, banking, real estate, and more. They were a bit close-lipped about their net worth, but certainly one of the richest private families in the empire.
And if I recall correctly, they were a new money family, too. Money-grubbing upstarts. I think I heard them called at court from time to time.
Did you really? I don't doubt it, of course. My word, that place can be just so beastly sometimes.
Actually, I thought that was rather tame. You should hear the things they call me.
Oh yes, they can say such horrid things about widows like us. Sometime you and I will have to swap stories of the more creative ones. When the circumstances are more pleasant, of course.
Of course. You know, it was really quite shocking. One minute the prince was playing host and telling ghost stories, and next thing you know, we all come running and he's dead on the floor.
Oh, indeed. That was a surprise of a most unpleasant nature.
Where were you when you heard the news? It was that one-eyed shambler in the ill-fitting coat who found me in the other bedroom. Did he find you first?
No. In fact, I was in here. And it was that young man with a decidedly orangish hue who brought me the news.
Our oh-so-helpful Horatio. He must have been done fixing the lights then.
Yes, they'd only just come on. I must say, he was in quite a state, with those robes of his flapping about everywhere. I expect I would have laughed if he didn't look so distressed.
Oh, alas, such a wasted opportunity.
Mind you, he didn't tell me exactly what the matter was at first. I'm not sure he knew himself. He only said that something had happened, and we had to gather everyone together right away.
And our two little darlings. You found them on the way back then?
Precisely, just as we were coming back down to the main floor.
Well, it's good we've got that all straightened up. With so much running about the house, it's enough to make one's head spin trying to sort it all out.
Oh, my word, yes! I used
My time was up. The police would be here any minute, and I certainly couldn't afford for those louts to come to their own misguided conclusions. Of course, at this point, I couldn't 100% guarantee that my own ideas would be correct. But at the very least, they would be a lot more entertaining. Wonderful. Everyone's here. I guess that means we can begin.
Begin, what exactly?
Why, exposing the murderer, of course.
You mean you know who it is?
Of course I do, my dear. Don't you?
Well, no. I'm not sure. At least not yet.
Pity. You were the one who said we had to see the truth for ourselves or something, weren't you? Well, it's a good thing that at least one of us has been busy this past little while.
Come now, darling, you simply can't keep us in suspense like this. Are you going to tell us or not?
Yeah, after all this, it better be good. Not that I'm getting my hopes up or anything, mind you.
Tut-tut. All in good time, my dear little girl. First, we all need to agree on some basic facts. Mr. Klops, you've been posted out in front of the house ever since we found the body, yes?
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
And did you see anyone leaving the house? Or anybody hanging about at all?
No, ma'am. There was no one there. And nobody would have got past me, that's for sure.
No, I'm sure they wouldn't. That glowering gaze of yours alone would be enough to send them scurrying back the way they came. As for the rest of us, did anyone find any trace of a break-in? Broken windows, muddy footprints, anything at all?
Indeed not. I saw nothing of the sort, and if I might say so, a magician's eyes are trained to spot even the smallest of details.
I didn't see anything either.
Not a thing.
Good then, so we agree. Nobody else has entered or left the house, which means that the killer is one of us, right here in this room.
Darling, this is just too much. If you make us wait even a moment more, I shall need a glass of brandy and a bottle of smelling salts.
Oh, I'll take more orange juice. If someone is getting drinks, that is.
Yes, sir. But first, how about we hear who did it?
This is it then. There's no going back. It's time to end this. Whoever I point to now is not going to be terribly pleased with me. But that's fine, as I'm not terribly pleased with them either. If they wanted to have half a chance of getting away with this, they made a most misfortunate choice in trying to frame me. It was you, Horatio. You killed Prince Titanico.
Me? Misfortune, surely you jest.
Horatio, my dear, I think we all agree that if anyone here is a jester, it's definitely you.
No. I am not a jester. A wizard, a sorcerer, a warlock, if you will. I'm absolutely sure we've been over this before.
Yeah. Grand Goofus of the Court or whatever it was. Can we get to the point? Why do you think he did it?
Yes, why would I kill my oldest and closest friend? I am more distraught by this terrible affair than anyone. Completely and utterly distraught.
Yes, motive. To answer that question, I think we need to first understand why we're all here for this little party at all. Before he left us for the last time, the prince said that he would return with an announcement. I have an inkling of what it might have been. From the beginning, I've had the nagging impression that this entire evening was a show staged for just one special someone. That someone is you, Miss Charisse.
A show? For me?
Yes, for you. It's no secret to any of us at this point that you and the prince had been, shall we say, stepping out as of late. And so the climax to the prince's little drama is obvious. He was going to ask for your hand in marriage. That's why he had this with him, isn't it?
Hey, where'd you get that?
Now, all in good time. For now, it's enough to prove the prince's intent. You don't look surprised, my dear.
No. Not completely surprised, anyway.
My, a grand public proposal then.
That's my friend. He was always such an incurable romantic.
Romantic? Oh, you poor naive boy. This was nothing of the sort. It was a cold, calculated move designed by the prince to get the result he wanted. Whisk the object of his affections out of her element into a strange and unfamiliar house, frighten her with ghost stories all evening, and then make a sweeping public proposal in front of a group of high society strangers like myself and the Comtessa. Oh yes, indeed. What girl wouldn't want all of that, I ask you?
Horatio, my friend, tonight will be the night. I have arranged a nice little soiree at the Lee Manor. Just a small affair, so as to be intimate, but with guests that my beloved does not know well. The setting should be perfect.
And you're going to propose right there, in front of everyone?
Yes, when the time is right. Of course, we must set the mood first. A flash of lightning, a clap of thunder, a macabre historical tidbit or two, and perhaps a little surprise courtesy of your talents, just to add a little more flair.
Why, of course. I can conjure up just the thing for you, I'm sure. But do you really think this will work?
My dear friend, how little you understand of the fair sex. This girl, she is pure as the fallen snow. She only sees the best in everyone. We have nothing to fear. She will be as putty in my hands.
I really must confess, it was all quite masterfully done. Rejecting a proposal under such circumstances would be unbelievably awkward, both socially and psychologically. Not a bad one to remember for my own books, I think.
This is all pure conjecture and, I might add, completely ridiculous.
Yes, you would be quite the authority on the ridiculous, wouldn't you?
But, be all of that as it may, you still have yet to get to the part where I have even the slightest reason to kill anybody.
Is that so? I rather thought by this point that would be obvious. It's the oldest tale in the book, really. 2 men, 1 beautiful, charming, and extraordinarily wealthy young girl. You couldn't let Titanico marry Charisse because you wanted to marry her yourself.
That's...
All of your life, you've lived in your friend's shadow, haven't you? And here he was, planning to marry a dream wife under your very nose. It was too much. He had to be stopped. She had to be yours.
Well, now, you see, you look here. While, of course, I have nothing but admiration for Miss Charisse, I mean, it's just, as you say, who wouldn't? But the incontrovertible point here is, how could I possibly have killed the prince when I was the one in the basement busily fixing the lights at the time?
Ah, excellent. So we've moved on from the why to the how. Indeed, how was the prince killed after all?
How? Don't we know how? Took a shiv right to the back.
I'm not so sure it's that simple.
To be fair, we can't really fault Mr. Klops here for seeing only half the picture. The prince was stabbed, yes. But is that what killed him? I think that the prince was pushed first. Let's use our heads, shall we? What was the prince doing when he left us?
He was going to answer the phone.
Yes, and there's a phone on the landing at the top of the double stairs. I think he was pushed from there and was only stabbed later, perhaps just to make sure.
Now that you mention it, there was something funny about the way he was lying.
I saw it too. I'm thinking it's very likely that the fall broke his leg.
Well, all that goes to show that it couldn't possibly have been me. Are you really suggesting I had time to go to the basement, run back up at the phone call, push the prince from the landing without him or anyone else seeing me, run to where he fell, stab him, run back downstairs, and then fix the lights? I'm a wizard, not a marathon runner.
Does seem like a bit of a tall order. Far more likely, someone trailed the prince from the dining room when he went to take the call.
I could swear that reminds me of something. Oh, yes! Misfortune! Am I wrong, or didn't your third husband die from a rather tragic tumble down the hall stairs?
Well, yes, he did. But I hardly see how that's relevant.
Oh, so you're saying she's got experience? Good enough for me. My vote is we check Misfortune here for the knife too. Who knows? Might settle the whole thing right now.
Searched? Me? I really think that's going a bit too far.
Oh, really? Seems pretty tame to me, compared to the alternatives.
Ah, well, when you put it that way.
Don't worry, darling, I'll spare you from Mr. Klops here. Just let me see your bag. Good heavens! There is a knife in here!
A knife? I knew it. It was bad luck that killed my friend after all. The bad luck was you!
Wizard boy, I think you're about the only one who didn't get that wordplay the first time round.
There's blood on the blade, and it's the same shape as the wound on the prince.
So that's why you had the boss's ring. You just killed him to take it off him.
Listen, I know it all looks bad.
Oh yeah, it looks bad.
I'm ever so sorry, dear, but we're going to have to hand you over to the police as soon as they get here. A complete scandal for you. I know, but one does what one must.
I hear them coming now. I'll go let them in, and then justice will be served.
All this, just for some jewelry? Was that really it, Misfortune?
Sherry has so much trouble believing the worst of people. Luckily, I've got no such problem. Just think. A dank, cold, dreary, sunless prison. You'll fit right in.
Ah, yes. They just keep dropping dead, the poor dears. It's so hard to find a good man with stamina these days.
No, ma'am. I'm not a butler. Just a valet.
Ah, you have it. Everyone, stay back. She's armed and very likely dangerous.
Oh my, I had heard she was seeing someone, but I never met.
Perhaps you preferred that your wife... No, that is your husband. You are the wife, and I am an idiot.
Misfortune, you seem to be picking on Mr. Klops for no reason at all. Why would you do that?
Yeah, nice place you got here. If you like entertaining dead people.